So one of the really cool things about being a War Thunder creator is that you get a ton of people who come up to you and they're like, hey, do you think this vehicle can work in War Thunder? Or do you think this tech tree can work? And honestly, it's a really cool and like fun conversation to have because for one, you're able to learn about new vehicles that you didn't know of. And for the second one is you kind of get to see what others' opinions is whenever it comes to different vehicles and as well as whenever it comes to tech tree. But the thing is that you can always look at these situations with rose-tinted glasses and kind of just pick out the good parts about them. But most of the time, whenever you're talking about adding a new tech tree to War Thunder or adding a new vehicle to War Thunder, there's a lot more to go into the vehicle and the tech trees themselves than many people do realize. So if you've been playing War Thunder for a little bit, you definitely probably have seen some user-created tech trees whenever it comes to War Thunder. We've had some for Ukraine, we've had some for, the Benelux tech tree, we've had the Latin American tech tree and all sort of stuff whenever it comes to that. And then we've also had stuff like South Korea, North Korea, and pretty much anything you can ever think of you can actually, put into the game. Now, before we go into the rest of this video, I do want to hit something on the head right now, and that is that I know some of you that make these tech trees are watching the video because, well, it's something that you're interested in. But I do want to make some criticizations for this sort of stuff, and you're probably not going to agree with a lot of it, which is completely fine. But at the same time, I do want to put something out there that I think is incredibly important. Even though War Thunder probably is not going to use majority of the content that you've made for these tech trees or the vehicles that you've researched or the time that you've put in to actually get, tech trees filled out, War Thunder is probably not going to use it. Now, is that a bad thing? No, because you did an incredibly good job of doing something that is way more important than a video game, is that you preserved history. And what I mean by that is, let's use the example of like the F-14 Tomcat. No one's ever going to forget about that vehicle. It's going to be a vehicle that sees, hundreds and probably even thousands of years of Top Gun is still alive at that point. But you know what is not going to survive? The random Chilean vehicles, they're just completely lost to history. Or different sort of things, like Brazilian vehicles, they're just lost to history because guess what? No one really cares about them. And I think it's incredibly important that even though War Thunder ceased to exist at some point, people can just go on the internet and then they're able to just look up Chilean vehicles and they see your tech tree and they're actually able to see stuff that you've made and, history that you've preserved. I think it's incredibly important whenever it comes to that sort of thing. So now let's get on to the rest of the video. So for this video, we're going to be splitting it up in a couple of parts. So this first part, whenever we're talking about adding new tech trees to War Thunder, is going to be basically on the gameplay and as well as like player perception. And then we will go into the topic of, I think a lot of people don't already care to actually discuss because, kind of boring, is the financial situation of actually putting in new tech trees and as well as just stuff whenever it comes to War Thunder. So for the player perception part, we just really need to go back in history just a little bit whenever it comes to adding tech trees like China. So whenever it came to China for War Thunder, it was a tech tree that was kind of praised, but also at the same time was very criticized of the tech tree being copy and paste. It was one of the newest, things into the game, but a lot of people did not like about it is that the early tiers of like rank 1, 2, and 3 were basically copy paste from other tech trees. Now whenever we look at China, it's a little bit better. Those vehicles are still definitely there, but the vehicles themselves, a lot of them have differences whenever it comes to the mid tiers like the Type 59s and as well as, stuff like the WZ-211. So what really happened to the Chinese tech tree is that it was, criticized. It was definitely one of those tech trees that you've seen pretty much a lot of people talk about of saying it's just a copy paste tree. It doesn't really have much to offer. But at the same time now that it's been fleshed out a lot more whenever it comes to the initial days of the tech tree, it definitely feels like it is a lot better now whenever it comes to that. Now, if we look at the tech trees which were added after China, we have Israel. Israel was a tech tree that honestly should never came to the game. And once again, people who are saying that Israel should never exist, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that it's a tech tree that should have been, put into the game as a subtree. And the only thing that I can personally think of, the reasons why that Israel was given its own tech tree is because of all the events which were coming out for America, at least whenever it came to the Merkavas. Those are very popular. The Merkava Mark 1B, the Mark 2B, and as well as the Merkava Mark 3D that's in the American tech tree. All three of those Merkavas were very popular whenever it came to War Thunder. And also you had the Magak 3 within the tech tree as well. And then you had stuff like for France, I believe they had the Valtors, and they also had an F-84. And, Britain had the Shot Cow. All these vehicles were honestly doing, pretty well. I've seen a ton of them whenever it came to, playing the game at that point in time in War Thunder's history. And it's the only reason I can think of that Gaijin just was like, hey, maybe we can just convert this into a normal tech tree and people would play it. But the number one problem that happened whenever this thing happened is that the people who already wanted to play these types of vehicles or already wanted to have them had them in the American tech tree. And they added Israel. It came into the game. It did not do the sin of what China did, is where, you know, the lower tiers were just going to be copy paste. As you know, Israel's lower tiers, they didn't start out in like 1939 like the rest of the War Thunder does. The vehicles themselves would have been from 45 plus. So a lot of these vehicles would have been, you know, surplus from America. You're going to have the Super Sherman with like the SA-50 gun, for example. You're going to have, you know, vehicles which honestly would not give much of a great experience to the game in general. And as we already know with Israel, the tech tree is just lacking in so many different ways whenever it comes to just, you know, lineups. I mean, yes, there's a ton of Magak, there's a ton of MBTs in the tech tree, but there's just something about the tech tree of where you don't have light tanks or you don't have, you know, support units, which just make the tech tree really, really bad. So you may be like, dog, well, it's pretty much a simple, easy fix. Just put some light tanks within the Israeli tech tree and put some, you know, support units that can help them out. And honestly, yeah, I mean, that's the answer to really do for Israel's, put in some more vehicles. But the problem with it is, and we'll talk about it later in this video, is the financial reasoning behind actually putting in new vehicles whenever it comes to that. And it's definitely something that has to be kind of thought about, because whenever you look at these smaller nations, is it really worth making new models, coding them in, you know, having different sort of things for maybe like, you know, let's just say, you know, 2,000 or 3,000 people to actually play the vehicle? Because, you know, as we know, Israel is one of the smallest tech trees within War Thunder whenever it comes to player count. So it's definitely one of those things that you really have to realize, is it better to, you know, keep going on with Israel or just get them into a playable state and kind of just leave them there and focus on the major nations, which you know you can make money from. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about it later in this video, but something to really actually think about whenever it comes to just War Thunder in general. So the next thing to talk about whenever it comes to like new independent tech trees is the problem of lineups, and as well as just crew skills and getting people to actually experience these tech trees in a positive light. Whenever, like, I remember this like very dearly, whenever I first started, you know, playing the Israeli tech tree, is that I got my M51s, I played them, and realized that 6.0 with 0 crew skills, these things were pretty bad when everyone else started at rank 1 and, you know, were able to build up some crew skills before they got at around that BR rating. You know, it felt really, really bad. And honestly, even now, my Israeli crews are still bad, and we're currently, I believe we're at like 8-7 with them now. Like, we're like grinding up the tree and everything, maybe 9-0 if, you know, some stuff has been moved up. But even now, my crews compared to every other nation, whenever it comes to, you know, being around that BR, you know, bracket, are just better. And, you know, playing like the M48s or playing like the M60 clones, you know, comparative to like the American ones, for example, the reload rate's really slow, the repair time's really slow, and, you know, the only thing that you can really do is just pay for them, unless you want to actually just keep playing the Israeli tech tree over and over. So the next thing I'll talk about is lineups. So lineups within these smaller tech trees, like for example, Sweden before they got Finland, or, you know, Israel right now, or even Italy, you know, there's definitely holes in the lineup. Like, let's just use Italy, for example, so you can't just say I'm going after Israel this whole video. Italy has a huge problem of the BTR BR, like the BTR they added for Hungary. The BTR is at its own BR. It's got nothing to run in the lineup. You either have to up tier it or just play it at its own BR. Same thing with the 6.0 lineup. You have 2 SPGs, the 2S1 and the M109. That's literally the lineup. Now tell me how you're supposed to combat a bunch of MBTs, a bunch of light tanks, a bunch of people who can just gun you out with their cast planes because those things have no armor. And tell me how that's like an effective lineup to actually run it within the game. And that's what happens with these small tech trees. If you look at America, there's barely any, I would say, BR that there's not at least like 3 or 4 vehicles in. If you look at Germany, same thing. Russia, same thing. Even Britain, same thing. But whenever you go to these smaller tech trees like Sweden, you definitely have holes. Like 6-7 for Sweden is just not there, even though the bank cannon's there. You know, like I said with Italy, the like 6.0 lineup is pretty poor. Israel, pretty much every lineup is poor, especially the lower tiers, because you don't have any cast planes that are worth anything, and you're missing a ton of SPAs. You know, throughout the whole tech tree, your SPAs are just not good. I mean, I know they added like the ZSU-57, but once again, what do people do with that thing? They go around and kill tanks with it. That's not really the best, you know, SPA in the game whenever it comes to actually killing aircraft. But whenever I look at other tech trees, like the examples of putting them into the game, you just see these glaring holes once again of where these vehicles will come into. They have like 3 cardinal sins. There's either 1, the copy paste issue. Number 2 is people are just not interested in these vehicles. And then number 3 is that you have the whole issue of this tech tree is so small. Like, let's just say, for example, you know, South Korean tech tree. what is it going to do? It's a very small tech tree. It's a bunch of M48s. It's a bunch of, Abrams clones. And I mean, you do have some unique stuff, especially with stuff like the K1 or like the K21s and all that sort of vehicles. But at the same time, would it be better for this tech tree to be a subtree of like America? Or would it, like, the ultimate thing is be a subtree of Japan? But, that's a topic people don't really want to talk about. But at the same time, would you want your tech tree to come in, have glaring holes in it whenever it comes to BR brackets, have different things which are just bad about it, have the whole thing of where people have to come into the tech tree and, have zero crew skills once again, have it to where people are just not interested in it, because guess what? People, like, no matter what you put into War Thunder right now, people are still going to play America, people are still going to play Germany, people are still going to play Russia. The big three will still be the big three in the game, no matter what you put into it. Now, imagine that you put your tech tree that you want people to have, an experience with in one of the big three tech trees. People are actually going to play it. Unlike what we have now, of where you have different tech trees which are just split up that should have been put into subtrees like Israel. So if you want my TLDW of what I think should happen to different tech trees coming to War Thunder, is for one, that they need to be a subtree. I don't think that at this point there can be any new tech tree that's added that's going to be substantially a good thing for War Thunder. I mean, like, there's not a tech tree that I can think of that's, for one, popular enough, two, that can make money, and then three, that could not already just be a tech tree within a different nation. Now, let's just say, for example, that your tech tree that you want to put in is not capable of being a subtree for any nation within the game currently, and you still think that the tech tree itself can be a, pretty cool thing for, the game. I do think that that is a case for some nations, and what I think should happen is the vehicles themselves, you should just be able to pick out, like, 5 or 10 vehicles that you think are really cool within that. Once again, they're not just a copy paste, they're just going to make people mad, and go put them in as event vehicles for different nations, or put them in as squadron vehicles, or put them in as premium. I think that's one of the only ways that you can really do it without adding a new tech tree for, once again, no one to play. And let's just say that you really want to see your copy paste vehicle added to the game that's already currently in the game. Go make a skin for it, put it on War Thunder Live, put it on, the War Thunder market, and then you're able to use it in game. If it's a historical one, then you're able for everybody to be able to see it. And honestly, that is just the number one solution to it, because once again, War Thunder is not a nationalistic project. I feel like a lot of people view War Thunder as that. It's a game. It's a video game. And honestly, it's really sad to see that a lot of people go for this nationalistic view of it. People only play in one tech tree, people being nation mains, people, just saying that they want their thing to be good, just screw the whole other parts of the game. It's really sad to see. And honestly, the same thing happens with these tech tree projects of people get so jaded into just looking at their own nation to where they don't realize that War Thunder is a game. It needs to have balance. It needs to have, areas that, people want to play. It needs to make money even. And people just kind of don't realize that. And honestly, it's one of the big problems with it. And hopefully it can be, fixed in the future. So now let's talk about the boring part, the financial woes of, these new tech trees being added into War Thunder. So War Thunder is not a free project. It has to make money. It has to actually, pay their employees. It actually has to, expand into new areas. Definitely Gaijin at this point is, kind of learning that. They're expanding into new games right now, whether it be Enlisted, whether it be, Age of Water. They're definitely becoming what I consider like a publisher now instead of like they know War Thunder at some point is just going to end. Like, it's going to be something that just kind of happens, and they want to be prepared for that. And that's why they're kind of just dabbling into new projects whenever it comes to Enlisted, like I said, Age of Water, and different sort of things. Like, I believe now they even own what's that game called? It's like a mobile game. I forgot what it was, like Modern Warships, I believe. They even help either produce it, or they help with the PC client of it or something like that. So they're definitely expanding their reach into different things. And if you even want some more examples of that, they helped with Atomic Heart. You wonder why we had an Atomic Heart event? Well, Atomic Heart was helped by Gaijin at least a little bit. I do believe they invested into it. And it's one of those things that you think about is, does Gaijin go for these like you can definitely say Age of Water is a useless project. You can definitely say Enlisted is a worthless project. There's definitely a bunch of World War II shooters out there that, have different sort of audiences and everything that maybe Enlisted wasn't the brightest idea to go after. You can definitely make that judgment call. I mean, I'm not making it. I'm just saying that you definitely can. But at the same time, is Gaijin's investing into a new tech tree? Let's just use, for example, right now, the one that's very popular right now is the Latin American tech tree. So when it comes to the ground forces, if you look at that tech tree, there's a ton of vehicles in it. I mean, there's, a ton of them. And the thing that you kind of have to realize is even though the vehicle themselves maybe is like a little bit of copy paste, a little bit different, it definitely has a new engine or it has a new gun or, the gun and engine are the same or something like that. So like, let's just use, for example, a Sherman. Let's just say that they add a new Sherman into it and it's like one of the easiest things to put into the game ever. You still have to go code it in. You still have to give it its unit tag. You still have to, give it new skins. You still have to, make sure it's not broken. You have to market it. You have to do all that sort of things. That's going to drive up the cost of the vehicle. And will it ever make its money back? Probably not. And it's one of those things that really even I'm kind of like sad about is like you see a lot of these updates that are coming out for War Thunder of where they're just mainly top tier vehicles, whether it be the F-15, whether it be F-16, whether it be anything whenever it comes to just top tier, the new Abrams are an example like that. Like you don't really see much whenever it comes to the lower tiers of War Thunder. Maybe every update there's like 1 or 2 vehicles that are added, but you don't see the expansion of those areas anymore because once again, they don't really make money. It's kind of just a barrier to get to the top tier of where, people want to play it. And I'm not saying that top tier should be your goal or anything to get to, but at the same time, people are going to G their Abrams. People are going to G their, F-16s to where they're combat effective and all that sort of stuff. But what people are not going to do is go back down to, like a, Sherman, for example, that they added with an American tech tree with the, the mutant turret on it. People are just going to either play that one or kind of just skip over it with premium. It's kind of just a cool thing they've added, but at the same time, it's not going to make the same amount of money as putting in something that is like flavor of the month. Everyone wants to see it. A bunch of Western audiences want to see it because once again, you also have to speak in terms of currency exchanges and all that sort of stuff because for some nations and some, people within the world, the currency is just not great. It's a sad reality that, most of the world kind of just runs on, like the top nations that, people have. And it's really sad to, say it in that way of just saying that, some people can't afford to, buy stuff within video games. But it's really the sad truth is that you have, people who have disposable incomes, people in countries which are struggling are definitely not going to have the disposable income as someone that is working at Starbucks within the US. And I'm not saying that they have disposable income either. But what I'm saying is the quality of life and the quality of living is way higher in some of the Western countries of where you can actually, afford to just spend money on luxury stuff, whether it be video games, whether it be, new computer parts and that sort of stuff. While, people in like the Philippines, for example, maybe need to use that money for food or, use it for, bettering their current self. Even though War Thunder is a free-to-play game with a barrier to entry of basically nothing other than have a computer and even at this point have a phone with War Thunder Mobile, it is still something that you have to realize is that the people who pay for the game and people who actually put money into it and invest into it are most of the people that are going to be playing it are within the Western world. And it's kind of sad to say it in that way, but at the same time, once again, War Thunder is not a charity. They actually have to make money, and if they don't make money, guess what? The game dies, the servers die. Servers cost something. Even if they want to do this completely for free of the goodness of their heart, the servers still would just die if they didn't have enough funding to actually, have people get on them every single day. So, and then on the flip side, Gaijin is kind of going to be really dumb if they do not go after the people who have nationalistic pride for the nation that they reside in. For example, with America, you have a bunch of American boos that, just love the Abrams. Guess what? They have a ton of disposable income. They also love the F-16. They love the F-15. And guess what? They'll still buy that like it's a hot cake on Sunday afternoon and it's about to go out of style. At the same time, the thing you have to realize is that War Thunder is going to cater to those people because guess what? They pay the bills. And once again, it's very sad that that's the truth. But if you really want your vehicles put into War Thunder, if you really want your vehicles put in, the thing is you're going to compromise. And I think it's cool that you're at least able to compromise because for a lot of games, they would probably just say, no, this ain't worth our time, this ain't worth our money, this ain't worth, everything. But War Thunder, on the flip side, has figured out ways to actually put in some of these vehicles, whether it be events, whether it be squadron vehicles, whether it be, premiums that can be put into the tech tree. For example, with the Latin American tech tree, for example, you can, get the good old example of the TAM2 IP, the, TAM2C. All three of those vehicles are Argentinian descent. And guess what? They found a home they found a place within the German tech tree of where they do really well in. They're able to help lineups. They're able to help, the German tech tree, whether it comes to, their grind and everything. And honestly, it's just a really good improvement to the tech tree. So yeah, this is kind of just one of those videos that I really wanted to make for a long time, kind of like a talking head video in a way. It's one of those things that's going to be controversial. And honestly, I don't really mind it being that, because I think it's incredibly important of the work that some of these people do for their tech trees. I feel like it's really cool that, this sort of thing exists. But at the same time, for War Thunder's sake, I do know there's a lot of issues and a lot of hoops and, bounds that they have to go through to get something like this to actually work. And compromise is the answer. Being completely nationalistic and thinking that your nation is just better than what's currently in the game is delusional. And honestly, if you really want to see your stuff within War Thunder, compromise. So hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. It is definitely a little bit different, but I do kind of like making it in a way. So I hope all you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys in the next War Thunder video.